My boss said I was too sensitive after my friend died, so I left without notice, built a brand, and his company now begs me weekly. I'm a 28-year-old professional, and I've always prided myself on being the reliable one at work, the person everyone could count on. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I got the news. My closest friend at the office, someone I'd shared lunch breaks, late-night project stress, and even small weekend plans with, had died suddenly. It hit me like a physical blow. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisted, and I remember staring at my computer screen for what felt like hours, unable to focus on the spreadsheets, emails, or meetings that normally dictated my day. I was hollow, exhausted, and consumed by grief, but life didn't pause just because I was breaking inside. I walked into my boss's office that afternoon, hoping maybe, just maybe, they'd understand. I lost someone today, I said quietly, trying not to choke on my own words. I need some time. Their eyes flicked up from their laptop, briefly meeting mine, and then dismissal. You're being too sensitive. We all have deadlines, you know. Personal stuff doesn't change that. My jaw tightened. I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded and walked back to my desk, each step feeling heavier than the last. Around me, coworkers murmured condolences, but their sympathy couldn't erase the sting of my boss's words. I felt betrayed, small, and somehow unworthy of grief. The office that day smelled like burnt coffee and stale carpets, fluorescent lights humming overhead, reminding me that the world didn't stop for me. My inbox filled with emails, my phone with notifications, each ping a cruel echo that life goes on even when yours has just tilted off its axis. I sat there, gripping the edge of my desk, trying to breathe through the panic that clung to me. And in that moment, a quiet, dangerous thought began to form. Maybe I couldn't stay here anymore. Maybe I needed to leave, even if I had no plan yet. But I didn't know how far I was willing to go, how much risk I could handle, how much fire I could start just to feel like myself again. The next morning, I trudged into work feeling like a ghost. Every corner of the office seemed louder, sharper, the fluorescent lights stabbing at my already aching head. I thought maybe, just maybe, people would treat me with care today. But I was wrong. My boss wasted no time pulling me aside for a check-in. You really need to toughen up, they said, arms crossed, eyes cold. Everyone's dealing with stuff. Your grief is slowing us down. Don't let it become a habit. My heart sank. I wanted to tell them they had no idea, that they couldn't possibly understand the depth of what I'd lost, but the words caught in my throat. I returned to my desk, trying to focus, tapping out emails while my mind replayed every moment with my friend. Their laughter, their annoying coffee habit, the way they always remembered my favorite snacks, it all crashed back at once. A coworker leaned over cautiously. Are you okay? I forced a smile, but inside I was unraveling. Even small gestures of kindness from them couldn't erase the sharp sting of my boss's words. I felt invisible, unprotected, like a target painted with my own vulnerability. Then came a minor, yet brutal, blow. A project my friend and I had been working on together had been reassigned, without explanation, to someone else. I overheard my boss whispering to another manager, "They're too emotional for this client. It's safer if we move it." My chest tightened, rage mingling with grief. How dare they? It was as if my pain made me incompetent, as if my humanity was a liability in their world. I sat there, fingers trembling over the keyboard, wondering how someone could be so blind, or so cruel. I glanced around at the other employees, some pretending not to notice, some awkwardly stealing glances. I realized then that no one was going to stand up for me. I was completely alone in a place that demanded my loyalty but offered nothing in return. And as I stared at my screen, heart racing and tears threatening, a dangerous thought crept into my mind. Maybe leaving wasn't just an option anymore. Maybe it was the only way to survive, but leaving meant risk. Leaving meant unknown consequences. And yet, the idea felt electric. By midweek, I was a mess barely holding it together. Every email felt like a knife. Every phone call a test I was failing. My boss's criticisms had escalated. They singled me out in meetings, accusing me of dragging the team down and questioning every minor decision I made. I tried to defend myself once, voice trembling, but they cut me off sharply. "Don't make this about feelings. This is business. Grow up." My stomach twisted, a cocktail of anger, exhaustion, and grief churning inside me. I wanted to run, scream, throw my laptop across the room, but I stayed, biting my tongue while the office buzzed indifferently around me. The day my boss humiliated me in front of the team, claiming I was unfit to handle client stress, I felt something snap. My hands shook as I packed up my notes for the day, each paper a reminder of the unfairness I was enduring. My mind raced back to my friend, their sudden absence, and the cold disregard I'd faced since. How could someone be so heartless? My chest ached, but beneath it simmered something hotter. Rage, the kind that whispers dangerous thoughts in quiet moments. I realized I didn't just want to escape. I wanted to reclaim my power, to prove them wrong. And then, almost in passing, I overheard a comment in the hallway that changed everything. The boss had subtly undermined my friend before their death, minimizing their contributions, throwing them under the bus during meetings. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just insensitivity. It was a pattern, a deliberate cruelty that had extended to someone I cared about deeply. A mix of grief and indignation clenched me like a fist. I knew I couldn't stay another day in a place where cruelty masqueraded as management. As I walked to my car that evening, city lights flickering over wet asphalt from the afternoon rain, I felt a surge of clarity. I was done. Done with the dismissals. Done with being too sensitive. Done with feeling small in a world that demanded my conformity. My hand hovered over the office door handle that Friday morning, my pulse thundering, and I knew. Leaving without notice was no longer just a fantasy. It was a necessity, and yet leaving meant stepping into the unknown with no safety net, no guarantee, just a flicker of hope. Friday morning, I walked into the office with a quiet fury humming under my skin. The fluorescent lights felt sharper, the hum of the computers louder, every keystroke echoing in my chest like a countdown. I didn't say a word to anyone. I barely looked up from my desk as I shoved my laptop into my bag. My resignation letter was typed, printed, and ready. No notice, no explanations. Just a few lines that said everything. I was done. The air around me felt charged, electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. My boss barely noticed me at first, then glanced up and smirked. "Leaving us in the lurch, huh?" they asked, voice dripping with condescension. I felt my pulse spike. "Yes," I said simply, my tone calm but unwavering. No apologies, no hesitation. Just the raw certainty that I was reclaiming my life. Coworkers whispered, glancing between me and the boss, their eyes wide with shock and curiosity. For the first time in weeks, I felt control, and it was intoxicating. I walked out of the office, the carpeted hallways and fluorescent buzz fading behind me. Outside, the city air was cool, slightly damp from a recent drizzle. I inhaled deeply, tasting freedom mixed with fear. My car smelled faintly of leftover coffee and upholstery cleaner, but the scent didn't matter. I didn't care about small comforts. I was untethered, walking into uncertainty, yet for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. That evening, alone in my tiny apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the city lights through the window. My phone buzzed, emails from clients I didn't reply to, messages from coworkers I had ignored. None of it mattered. I was free from a place that had belittled me, mocked my grief, and stripped my dignity. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, dangerous excitement stirred. I had no plan yet, but maybe this was exactly the kind of leap I needed to rebuild everything I'd lost. Little did I know. The real fight, the one that would test me completely, was just beginning. The first few weeks after leaving were terrifying. My bank account felt painfully small, my apartment suddenly too quiet, and every night stretched out like a reminder of how little I had. I had no plan beyond surviving, no roadmap for building something new from the wreckage of my old life. But in that emptiness, a spark began to grow. A stubborn, insistent whisper that maybe I could turn all of this pain into power. Maybe I could build something that didn't just pay the bills, but made me feel alive again. I spent hours hunched over my laptop, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and stacks of notes. Ideas swirled chaotically, some brilliant, some laughably naive. I tested small campaigns, reached out to contacts I'd only ever nodded to in passing, and slowly, things began to click. My first real client signed on. A tiny victory, but it hit me like a bolt of electricity. I could actually do this. I could actually succeed without the approval of the people who had made me feel worthless. But the fear never left completely. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake listening to the distant hum of traffic outside my window, imagining failure at every turn. What if I ran out of money? What if nobody cared about what I had to offer? What if I'd made a huge mistake leaving the only stability I'd ever known? And yet, with that fear came a strange thrill. This was mine. My life, my rules, my chance to prove everyone wrong. One evening, as I reviewed my progress, I noticed something unsettling. A familiar name had commented on one of my posts, subtly suggesting they'd been watching my work. My heart skipped. Could it be? The old office? The same people who had dismissed me, ignored me, or undermined me. The thought made my stomach tighten. And in that moment, I realized leaving wasn't just an escape anymore. It was the start of a game I hadn't fully understood yet. The next move would be mine, but the question lingered. Would I play it carefully, or let the fire burn? The next few months were a whirlwind of chaos and small victories. My brand started gaining traction. Followers, clients, and recognition slowly trickled in, each one a tiny proof that I hadn't made a mistake. I celebrated in quiet ways. A perfectly brewed cup of coffee, a late-night email from a satisfied client, a message from someone thanking me for advice I hadn't expected to be impactful. But alongside every small win came waves of doubt. Was I moving too fast? Was I ready for this? Could I really handle being my own boss when failure could feel so permanent? Then came the first sign that my old company had noticed me. A familiar logo appeared on a competitor's post, an uncanny similarity to a project I'd been developing on my own. My stomach twisted. Was it coincidence, or were they paying attention, quietly copying ideas they hadn't valued before? Rage and vindication collided inside me. It felt thrilling, terrifying, and oddly satisfying all at once. They'd dismissed me, undermined my grief, and yet now my work had become irresistible to them. Late nights blurred into mornings as I scrambled to stay ahead. The pressure was immense, deadlines tight, and the constant hum of my phone and laptop made sleep feel like a distant memory. Some days I questioned if I'd bitten off more than I could chew, if my ambitions were reckless. And yet, every time I saw a client thrilled with my work, a message praising my creativity, or my follower count climb, it reminded me that I was capable, stronger than I'd ever known. One evening, I sat staring at my screen, a notification pinging in the corner. It was from someone in my old company, a vague, almost casual message about potential collaboration. My pulse quickened. My mind raced with possibilities and danger. Was this a trap? Were they just trying to exploit me now that they realized my worth? I leaned back, gripping my chair, knowing that the next step I took could change everything, and that the stakes had just gotten infinitely higher. The game had begun. And this time, I held the cards. By the next quarter, my brand was no longer just surviving. It was thriving. Overnight, it felt like everyone wanted a piece of what I was building. Social media notifications flooded my phone, emails stacked up faster than I could respond, and client inquiries became a constant hum in the background of my life. My small victories had snowballed into real influence. People recognized me at events, commented on my content, and even competitors were starting to take notice. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not for who I had been in a toxic office, but for the person I had fought to become. I remember the first big paycheck arriving in my bank account. I held it in my hands, disbelief and relief washing over me, tasting sweet like victory. The apartment, once suffocating in its quietness, now felt like a haven where my dreams were tangible, concrete. Nights were still long and stressful, but they were my own, filled with purpose instead of dread. I could almost feel my confidence radiating outwards. I was untouchable in ways I had never imagined while chained to a desk that didn't care about me. But with success came subtle reminders of the past. I noticed quiet whispers from old contacts, awkward messages from people who had once ignored me, and the undeniable fact that my former office was still watching. It was thrilling, and a little unnerving, to realize that my independence had caught their attention. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving grief and dismissal. I was thriving while the people who had undervalued me were forced to watch. And then it happened. A small email popped up, sent to my professional inbox, unsigned but unmistakably from someone in the old company. "We've been watching your progress. Perhaps we can talk." My pulse raced. The excitement of success collided with a thrill of danger. They were reaching out, and I knew, in that moment, that my life had entered a new phase. The stakes were higher than ever, and the next move would define everything. The question lingered: should I respond, or let them beg in silence? It was a Tuesday morning when the email arrived, simple and clinical, yet packed with an unmistakable weight. "We'd like to discuss potential collaboration. Please let us know your availability." My hands froze over the keyboard, heart hammering as a cocktail of shock, disbelief, and bitter satisfaction coursed through me. After months of being dismissed, mocked, and told I was too sensitive, here they were, reaching out like desperate moths to a flame they had once tried to snuff. I reread the message a dozen times, noticing the subtle tone of subservience hidden behind corporate phrasing. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the way they had belittled me during my grief. Just the cold, calculated request: "We need you now." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights through my apartment window, letting the irony sink in. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the one begging for approval anymore. I was the one holding leverage. The dopamine rush was immediate, but so was the hesitation. I could respond cautiously, play hard to get, or let it sit, watching their panic build silently. My mind replayed every slight, every belittling remark, every dismissive comment from my old boss. Rage mixed with vindication in a way that was intoxicating. This wasn't just about business. It was personal now, a chance to finally assert control and reclaim my dignity. Late that evening, I drafted a reply but stopped halfway, staring at the screen. Every option felt like a gamble. If I engaged too quickly, I risked being manipulated again. If I waited, I risked them finding someone else, or worse, realizing they needed me more than I had imagined. And then a realization hit me like a punch. They didn't just need collaboration. They needed me to fix what they had neglected, what they had undermined, what they had failed at while I was left to suffer. The message sat there, blinking in the corner of my inbox, daring me to make a choice. And I knew, whichever way I moved next would change everything. After a sleepless night, I decided to reply, but on my terms. The email I sent was short, polite, and deliberately distant. No eagerness, no apology, no hint that their request stirred anything but professional curiosity. I made it clear I controlled the conversation now. Every word I typed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost in that office years ago. For the first time, I felt the subtle thrill of power, the intoxicating satisfaction of someone realizing you're no longer theirs to command. When the responses started trickling back, I realized just how far the dynamic had shifted. My old boss, once condescending and dismissive, was suddenly careful, deferential even. Every message, every request, every attempt to negotiate hinted at desperation masked in corporate jargon. And yet I held back. I didn't want revenge, not in a petty sense. I wanted control, acknowledgement, and perhaps the satisfaction of making them aware of exactly what they had squandered. It was exhilarating and a little unnerving. Then came the shocking reveal. The company had been quietly monitoring my brand for months, copying minor strategies, desperately trying to stay relevant while I surged ahead. Rage flickered again, but it was different this time. A controlled, sharp satisfaction. They had underestimated me. assumed I was fragile and replaceable, and now they were scrambling to keep up. I realized my growth wasn't just validation for me. It was a silent, undeniable rebuke of everything they had done. Late one evening, as I sipped coffee and reviewed contracts, I felt a pang of doubt. What if I let the thrill cloud my judgment? Could I handle the responsibility? The subtle manipulation they were still attempting, even as I held the upper hand? I leaned back, letting the city hum beneath my window, heart racing. One thing was certain, the stakes were higher than ever. And just as I was plotting my next move, a new message popped up from the old boss, more desperate this time. The cursor blinked, waiting for my response, and I knew this was just the beginning of the real game. The next week brought chaos I hadn't anticipated. My old company hit a sudden snag. A major client pulled out after a disastrous presentation, one they were clearly unprepared to salvage. Emails and calls flooded in, frantic and panicked, and I watched from a distance as the boss who had once mocked my sensitivity stumbled publicly. I could almost hear the desperation in their messages. "Can you help us fix this?" Every word was dripping with the very humility they had never shown me before. It was a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. I remembered the countless times they had belittled me, told me I was too sensitive, dismissed my grief, and undermined my ideas. And now, here they were, reduced to begging for help from the person they had treated like a liability. I felt a cold surge of vindication, but I reminded myself to stay controlled. This wasn't about petty revenge. This was about leverage, proof of my strength, and the undeniable fact that I had outgrown them. I finally responded, but only in a way that asserted my power. I outlined terms, subtly reminding them of my contributions, and left them scrambling to agree. My email was calm, polite, yet every line radiated authority. The frantic tone in their next reply made it clear. They understood, perhaps for the first time, exactly who they had dismissed. As I closed my laptop and sat back, sipping lukewarm coffee, I realized something deeper. This wasn't just professional satisfaction. It was the culmination of years of invalidation, grief, and quiet suffering. They were facing the consequences of underestimating me, and I was finally free to stand in the full force of my own value. Yet even in that triumph, a flicker of uncertainty remained. Would they ever truly change? Or would they continue to stumble, relying on me without gratitude? My phone buzzed again, another urgent message from them. And in that moment, I knew the final confrontation wasn't far off. The day finally came when I agreed to a video call with my old boss. Sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, I could feel the tension coil in my shoulders. Their face appeared on the screen, flustered, defensive, eyes darting, so different from the condescending smirk I remembered. We didn't realize how much we underestimated you," they stammered, voice tight. "We need your insight. Can you guide us?" Every word dripped with desperation, and I leaned back, letting it wash over me. I had the power now. They weren't in control anymore. I listened carefully, nodding occasionally, pretending to consider their pleas. Internally, I was cataloging every slight, every insult, every dismissive comment from the past. "I've learned a lot since I left," I said slowly, my tone calm but firm. "I know what my work is worth, and I expect it to be respected." The shift in energy was palpable. The person who had once dictated my worth was now waiting for my approval. I could feel the tables turning in real time, a thrilling, almost cinematic reversal. Then came the subtle twist. They tried to manipulate me again, softening their tone, dangling potential perks, hinting at old alliances. But I was ready. "I will help," I said, deliberately measured. "But only under clear terms. My work, my boundaries, no exceptions." Their eyes widened, panic flickering for a moment before they masked it with a nervous smile. For the first time, I wasn't pleading, bending, or shrinking. I was commanding respect. As the call ended, I sat back, letting a shiver of satisfaction travel down my spine. The confrontation had been tense, high stakes, and deeply satisfying. I had not only reclaimed my professional authority, but I had also delivered the silent message that dismissing someone's humanity comes at a cost. And as I closed my laptop, I realized the most powerful moment wasn't the negotiation. It was knowing I had survived, thrived, and risen above every insult, every slight, every barrier they had thrown in my path. Yet, in the quiet after, I couldn't help but smile at the thought they would be contacting me weekly, begging, humbled, and completely aware of what they had lost. Sitting in my apartment that evening, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, I finally let myself breathe. The chaos, the grief, the belittlement, it all felt distant now, replaced by a quiet, exhilarating sense of control. My brand was thriving, my skills undeniable, and the people who had once dismissed me were now the ones asking for help, humbly and frequently. Every email from my old boss, every desperate call was a reminder of how far I had come. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was in command of my own narrative. I reflected on the journey, the shock of my friend's death, the cold dismissal by someone I once respected, the endless days of doubt and fear after leaving without notice. Each step had been brutal, terrifying, and isolating, but it had also forged something unbreakable inside me. I realized that grief, pain, and betrayal weren't just obstacles. They had been catalysts, shaping me into someone resilient, resourceful, and unapologetically strong. My victories weren't just professional. They were deeply personal, a testament to my endurance and worth. Even the old company, once a source of stress and humiliation, had inadvertently validated my strength. Every message they sent, every desperate attempt to gain my guidance, reinforced that I was no longer the powerless employee they had mocked. I smiled, knowing I had the freedom to decide how involved, or uninvolved, I wanted to be. I could help them, set boundaries, or simply watch them struggle from afar. The power dynamic had completely reversed, and I felt the intoxicating thrill of that truth. And in the quiet, I understood something essential. I didn't need revenge to feel fulfilled. Success, respect, and self-reliance were far sweeter. I had turned pain into growth, grief into motivation, and dismissal into triumph. As I closed my laptop and sipped my coffee, I allowed a rare moment of contentment. The emails would keep coming, the requests would keep piling up, and the reminders of past injustices would linger, but none of it could shake the strength I had built. I was free, empowered, and finally whole. The past no longer controlled me. I did,